This conference will now be recorded.
Okay, so I'd like to tonight go over Sphira, and then with that we will next week return back to our regular programming. We were in the midst of Shabbos,
Yes.
right? But that's what happens, right? In other words, we can have our set area of study, but as things arise, as in Jewish holidays, and so we certainly need to dedicate the time to that. Okay, Sfirat HaOmer. Right now we are in the midst of the counting of the Omer. So there is the mitzvah of the counting of the Omer. There are the minhagim, the customs that accompany that. So what is the Omer? What is going on? It's a measure of barley. Good.
Yes.
And tell me about this measure of barley. What are we counting? 1 barley, 2 barley? No, we're not.
Counting up until giving the Torah.
Okay. So the Omer was a meal offering made of barley that was brought on the second day of Pesach.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? Now, this Omer actually is a measurement. Where else do we find this measurement? Besides the korbanot, where else do we find an Omer? That was barley also. It might be an Omer, I'm not sure, Esther. I'm not sure. But by the man, the Omer, right, was the measurement for each person per day. So the Omer is this barley offering that was brought on the second day of Pesach. Once that barley offering was brought, then we were allowed to partake of the Chadash. What does Chadash mean? New. And in this context, the Chadash is the new grains that have grown. Okay? In general, we only partake of things once we've given the first of it to God, so to speak, as an acknowledgement that all that we have comes from God. Teruma, from our produce, we take off the first part. It's about 2%. We give that to the Kohanim, to the priests. Only then, and then the other tithes also take off. Only then can we partake. Bikurim, the first fruits, they're brought to the Beit HaMikdash, to the temple, each year. Our firstborn son needs to be redeemed from the Kohanim. The first, which is usually the pinnacle of our excitement and our feeling, our sense of this is mine, we have to recognize and realize this is from God, and we act accordingly. So on the very second day of Pesach, in the Beit HaMikdash, the Omer offering was brought. So it's not, well, and then we're counting 49 days. The main idea is to count and to link Pesach to Shavuot, Exodus from Egypt to Sinai revelation. Why is it so crucially important for us to link those two events?
We need to be ready to receive the Torah. We need to be, our internal selves need to be in an accepting form.
Okay, good. Leticia said we need to hear it well,
Yep.
right? We need to be ready and willing to accept the Torah. Good. Gabriella, what were you about to say? Okay, good. So Gabriella said that the Exodus can't just be freedom into a void. It can't just be going from, it must also be going to. Ladero?
Because they were used so long, you fell to the lowest level, so the 49th level of Tuma. The counting going towards Shavuos.
Okay, good. Good. So Kabbalistically speaking, we had sunken down to the 49th level of impurity. Actually, the Exodus brought us back up to ground zero. And now we need to ascend and climb to the 49th level in order to receive the Torah. And to keep in mind that it's not meant to be just a physical exodus. From the very beginning, when God spoke to Abram, to Abraham, at the Brit Ben Abitarim, the covenant between the halves, he said, your children will be enslaved in a land that is not theirs. And then afterwards they will leave with a tremendous treasure. The tremendous treasure is a reference to the Torah that we will receive. Now, because we might not have appreciated the full scope of the Torah, therefore we did leave with an actual treasure, and that was the vessels that we took from the Egyptians as payment for 210 years, at least a down payment on 210 years of slavery, and also by the splitting of the sea, the seventh day of Passover, then all their chariots and horses that were studded with all these gems, they sunk, the gems, the ocean, the Yam spat it out for us. So we had physical wealth, but the real Rechush Gadol is the Torah. So we have to link, and therefore there are those that even compare the days that we're in now as Chol HaMoed. Chol HaMoed we're familiar with. We just had the intermediary days. Well, there are those that view Pesach as the first days, Shavuot as the last days, and the Sphira is the intermediary days. So really we're counting from Pesach. Why don't we start counting from Pesach itself? So that the Sefer HaChinuch explains that we don't want to take away from Pesach. So we start the counting on the second day, which is the day of the Omer. But there is also special significance in that, because we brought a barley offering on the second day of Pesach. On Shavuot, that is one of the few times that we bring a wheat chametz offering called the shtei halechem, the 2 loaves of bread. Barley is normally considered to be like animal food. Wheat is considered to be human food, an elevated grain of eating. So we're working our way up from the somewhat animal-like existence that we had in Egypt, working our way up to that fully human state of receiving the Torah. The Torah is what enables us to control ourselves, to become that much more godly, to become human beings of a more godly level. And therefore we're counting actually from the barley to the wheat, from the matzah to the chametz. Now, isn't that interesting? Right? Pesach, the chametz was kryptonite, right? The smallest amount was problematic. And why is it that on Shavuot we can then have the chametz? That has to do with the Torah. Explain to me, my friends. Why, with the Torah, can we now have the chametz? Good. We know how to rightly judge. Good. I would say we know how to rightly balance. Torah is what gives us that perspective to be able to, Judaism is not about going up onto a mountaintop. Judaism is about being involved in this world and channeling it, utilizing it. A point that that I make often. I think it's a pretty salient point. Two things that the other great monotheistic religions consider to be sacrilege, we call it holiness, right? Catholicism, at least, looks at marriage, intimacy in a marriage relationship as something that is for the weak, for those who are strong. So they'll enter the monastery, they'll become priests, they'll become nuns, right? And Judaism says no. Marriage is called kiddushin. Marriage is, please God, right? When you complete your conversions and we have a Jewish wedding, you will say, Hariat mikudeshet li. Behold, you are betrothed to me. You are sanctified to me. It is kedusha. A relationship between a husband and wife is holy. Shir Hashirim, the Song of Songs, one of the 5 Megillot, the 5 scrolls that we read them at different points, right? We read them on the 3 pilgrimage holidays, that's 3 of them. We read them on Tisha B'Av, that's Eicha, and of course we read into the scroll of Esther on Purim. The one that we read on Pesach is Shir Hashirim. Shir Hashirim is the Song of Songs. It is a love song between a man and a woman, allegorically, metaphorically speaking about the love, the intimacy between us and God. And if the other books of scripture are called Kodesh, holy, Shir Hashirim is described as being Kodesh Kadashim, the Holy of Holies. And that's how we view a marriage relationship. The intimacy, when it's done with respect and it's done with love, is the Holy of Holies. And Islam looks at all alcoholic beverages as being forbidden. And we make Kiddush, once again, Kadosh, Kiddush, every Friday night over a cup of wine. So Judaism is about being involved in the world, infusing this world with Kedusha, with holiness. So yes, it's once we have the Torah, we can have the chametz. We can have the olam hazeh, this world, because now we know how to channel it. We know how to balance. We know how to utilize it. So why are shouldn't we count down to Shavuot? 49 more days, 48, 10 more days, 9, 8, 7. Why are we counting today, right? We counted. Let's all count now. We didn't count yet. Everybody together. We should stand for counting. Hayom, today. Asara, 10 yamim, days. Shehem, which are Shavua Echad, 1 week. Ushlosha yamim, and 3 days. La Omer, towards the Omer. And this year it's easy to remember because we're in sync, meaning today is the start, the night is already the start of Yom Shlishi, the 3rd day of the week, Sunday, Monday, Tuesday. Tuesday is Yom Shlishi. Oh, so it's 1 week and 3 days, right? So it's easy to keep the calculation.
So we don't say the blessing
Yes. I already made my blessing before, so that's why yes. Okay, so why don't we count down to that great day of Shavuot?
Is it because Yisroel is always an ascension? It's always
Okay, that's a nice idea. Right, Ladero said that whenever we speak about Israel, we're always ascending to the land of Israel. Okay, nice idea. Any other ideas out there?
Well,
Maybe, Rabbi, I was just going to say that maybe we're diminishing our impurity as we count down.
But saying, we don't count down. We're counting up, right? So why don't we count down? But I think you've actually hit onto it. If I'm counting down, then at the end, what do I have? Zero. Efes. Nothing. Garnished, as they say in Yiddish. You got nothing left. The whole idea is to count up, to build ourselves up. And right, it needs to, right, as they say, you have to make each day count. We build ourselves up. There are those there we have a Mishnah teaching in Pirkei Avot, Ethics of the Fathers, that the Torah is acquired with memchet dvarim, with 48 ways that the Torah is acquired. So these are the 48. Now we have 48. The last day we try to review all of them as we ascend towards receiving the Torah. So it needs to be a build up, right? Not a countdown to zero, but a build up to the 50. Okay?
Rabbi, I have a
Yes.
question. So when we were in Egypt, it was the 49th level of the lowest that we could ever be before God would say goodbye. So,
Yes.
so then by crossing the sea, coming Pesach and all of that, then the 49th actually then we were minus 49 and now we're going
we were lifted up. It says on Kanfei Nisharim, on the wings of eagle. The whole experience of the Exodus lifted us up to ground zero, so to speak. And now during these 49 days, we are climbing, ascending. Well, or they, hopefully we're climbing and ascending. They climbed and ascended up to the level to receive the Torah. Okay? So that is the idea of Sfirat. That is the Torah mitzvah of Sfirat HaOmer. Now, with that, these should be joyous days, right? Joyous days. But there is another component, a much later component that is laid upon this. And that is that during these days, the students of Rabbi Akiva died. And the Gemara tells us they died because on their level, they were not treating one another with the proper kavod, the proper respect. Now, remember that Rabbi Akiva, their Rebbe, is the one who said that the entire V'ahavta l'reacha kamocha, love your neighbor like yourself. That is the entire Torah. Everything else is just an explanation. So we can imagine the level that was expected from his disciples. So, right, on their level, they were not on the level that they were meant to be. Therefore, and they died during this period. Therefore, we have 33 days of mourning that we have during this period. And in that, we don't have weddings until after Lag BaOmer. Lag BaOmer, Lamed is 30, Gimel is 3, the 33rd day of the Omer. We don't have weddings. We don't listen to music, at least not to live music during this time. So we have, right, we don't shave or get haircuts during this time. So these are aspects that we have. And there are different customs. Some observe the first 33 days, which will take us, we discussed this, will take us until Lag BaOmer. Some will start on Sunday, which is Rosh Chodesh, and go straight through until Shavuot. So there are different customs as to when to observe those 33. Either it's the first 33, or it's basically the last 33, or besides the last few days before Shavuot, right? But it can't be both, meaning a person can't say, well, I'm good to go until Rosh Chodesh, and then I'm good to go after Lag BaOmer. One can change their custom. I actually am going to be doing the second, yeah. Okay. This seems very strange. 33 days of mourning because of the students of Rabbi Akiva. When it comes to the destruction of the temples, how long a period of mourning do we have? 3 weeks. Good. We have 3 weeks, and then the last part of that is the 9 days, which is increasing. And then we have Erev Tisha B'Av, and then we have Tisha B'Av. But it's a sum total of 3 weeks. Actually, it's 22 days, right? But basically it's 3 weeks. So for the destruction of the temples, we have 3 weeks. For the students of Rabbi Akiva, we have 33 days. It seems somewhat strange. And an explanation that's given is that Rabbi Akiva, this was during the time of the destruction of the temple. His students could have been the army. During the time of Rabbi Akiva, we had the Bar Kokhba revolt. Rabbi Akiva thought Bar Kokhba was the Mashiach, but it didn't pan out. He didn't pan out, which means he probably could have been had we been worthy of it. He could have been the Mashiach. Rabbi Akiva's students would have been the army, the Tzva Hashem, the army of God. But they fell short. They fell short. And we as a nation fell short. So it's not simply the deaths of these Talmidim, but this represents the death, the passing of a golden opportunity that we had for Mashiach, which went awry. So if we have 3 weeks of the destruction of the temples, that which could have resurrected that which could have resurrected that, thank you very much, thank you, that which could have resurrected that, but did not, is certainly cause for additional mourning. Sorry? That's why I give a thank you to Esther. I was watching the passing of the information. Yeah. So we have these days of build-up, of anticipation to get to Shavuot. At the same time, we have this interface, this overlaying that we have of certain aspects of mourning that go along with it. But to look at the days of Sphira as days of mourning is a bit of a stunted view, right? The mourning only came about much after the time of the Torah being given. But Sfirat HaOmer is in the Torah. It is a mitzvah d'oraita. It is a Torah mitzvah. Women are exempt from this mitzvah. Many women will count and do count. Why are women exempt from this mitzvah? Right? That fits into our normal category of positive time-bound mitzvot that women are exempted from. As we said before, only a woman, men do not have anything in their body that works time-based. We have nothing that goes on a monthly cycle. Women are a time-based mitzvah, and a specific mitzvah of the woman is the family purity, is the mikvah. So that is her being a time-based mitzvah and having that time-based mitzvah. Nevertheless, as we know from other instances, even though a woman is exempt from a time-based mitzvah, if she wants to perform it, she can perform it and can make a bracha as she performs it. That's why women often make, well, the women have widely accepted to hear the shofar blowing on Rosh Hashanah, positive time-bound mitzvah, but they've accepted that. Many will shake the lulav and etrog, positive time-bound mitzvah. Many will sit in the sukkah, positive time-bound mitzvah. Matzah is an exception. Matzah on the night of the Seder, even though it's a positive time-bound mitzvah, women are obligated because the Torah puts together the prohibition, don't eat chametz and eat matzah. Whoever is included in the prohibition of don't eat chametz is included in the mitzvah to eat matzah. Another example, based on a similar structure, that's a positive time-bound mitzvah that women are obligated in, comes on a weekly basis. Kiddush. Havdalah is more questionable. We'll come to Havdalah in a minute. Kiddush of Shabbat. Women are obligated. Why? Similarly, Shamor v'Zachor. Guard, observe. Those are the two terms we have about Shabbos. They were said b'dibor echad, as we sing in the Lecha Dodi Friday night. Shamor v'Zachor b'dibor echad. Shamor v'Zachor. With one utterance, Hishmiyanu was made heard to us. Kalam Yuchad, by the one God. So once again, just like by Pesach, whoever's obligated and don't eat chametz is obligated and do eat matzah. Whoever's obligated in don't break the Shabbat, all of the don'ts of Shabbat, is also obligated in the do of Shabbat. Okay, but Omer is women are not obligated. Women, if they want to make the bracha and count, they can. Now, briefly, one only makes the bracha if you've counted every single day. If you've missed a day in its entirety, then you can no longer make the bracha. The reason, but you should continue to count. Okay? We make the bracha at night, and then we count. Let's say I did not make the bracha at night, but I remember the next day. I will count the next day without a bracha, and I'm still in the game. The next night, I can continue to count with a bracha. If I missed an entire day, then I do not continue counting subsequent nights with a bracha. One can listen, if you hear Marav, I'll make the bracha, I'll have you in mind. It can be, right, and then count, or you just count without a bracha. The reason for that is as follows. There are two opinions. One opinion views counting the Omer as 49 individual mitzvot. The other one counts it as one group mitzvah. Okay? If each one is its own individual mitzvah, the same way that if a person didn't wear tefillin one day, that would not preclude him from wearing tefillin the next day. So it's over here, if one missed counting one night, that will not preclude them from counting the following nights. But because there is an opinion that it's all one mitzvah, therefore, right, it's kind of being a little bit pregnant, right? Once you missed one, right, then you no longer have that whole group. We take into account both opinions, because according to that opinion, once you missed one night, there's no point in counting anymore. Forget about the bracha, there's no point in counting. According to the other opinion, if you missed the night, continue counting with a bracha. So we take into account both opinions. And if one missed an entire day, then one will continue to count, because maybe each night is its own individual mitzvah, but without a bracha, because maybe it's one big group. So you'll count, but without a bracha as we go forward. Okay. Just one exception to the rule that we have, that if a woman wants to do a mitzvah aseh, a positive time-bound mitzvah, she can and would make a bracha. An exception to that is the mitzvah of tefillah. Okay? And the reason behind that is as follows. There the Shulchan Aruch says, the Ramah says, that we would discourage, we should protest if when a woman wears tefillin. We have teachings that Rashi's daughters wore tefillin. Could be they did. But nowadays the issue is as follows. Men have a problem with wearing tefillin. The problem that men have with wearing tefillin is that we're supposed to have our mind completely focused on the tefillin, focused on holiness whenever we're wearing the tefillin, and good luck to us. Right? We can't keep our mind focused for 10 seconds. Forget about it the whole time. So we have a problem with wearing tefillin. However, the Torah commands us to wear tefillin. So what do? We wear tefillin while we are davening. And then we take off the tefillin, with the hope being that while we're davening, our minds will be focused on where it's supposed to be. So when it comes to tefillin, there is this give and take. There is the problem of wearing tefillin, but there is the obligation to wear tefillin. So therefore, we wear tefillin and try to keep our minds focused. By those who are not obligated, that's why whereas a boy will start to wear tzitzit when he's very young, he'll only start to wear tefillin soon before his bar mitzvah. The same idea, because he needs to do before mitzvah, he needs to know how to do it when he becomes bar mitzvah. But before that, you don't have this balance. You have the problem with wearing tefillin, which is the lack of focus, but you don't have the obligation. So when it comes to women also, it's the same problem. They have, as we all have, the problem of staying focused, but it's not counterbalanced by the obligation to. And that's why when it comes to tefillin, women are discouraged. We would protest. There was a woman here with the best of intentions that came as wearing tefillin, and I, obviously privately, I didn't make a scene, but I explained to her that the custom here is that women don't wear tefillin, and she said to me, but I do wear tefillin, and I gave her, I compared it, on Chol HaMoed, most people don't wear tefillin. Here in the States, some people do. In Israel, you don't wear tefillin. So I said, so when someone whose custom is to wear tefillin on Chol HaMoed, when he goes to Israel, what does he do? He doesn't wear tefillin at the minyan. And then privately, he respects the minhag of the land of Israel. And privately, when he goes home, he puts on his tefillin. So I said that could be a good template. I understand you wear tefillin every day. It's very important to you, right? But I think that's a good template. When you go to a place where the custom is that women don't wear tefillin, you should respect that custom. And when you go home, if you choose to put tefillin on, that would be a good template. Another area of a positive time-bound mitzvah that I would say in the Orthodox world women don't do is talit, tzitzit, and a talit. And that is really because that's become almost a woman's protest movement, a Jewish woman's protest movement against excluding me from. So, that's become not so much like for you when you want to count sphira, you want to hear shofar, you want to lulav or sukkah, right? It's that I want more spirituality. That's become representative of more of an attitude of, oh, only the men do it, the women don't do it. Well, we'll show you, right? We're just as right. So that's why in the Orthodox world, for the most part, yeah, certainly here in Beth Jacob, right? Though I wouldn't, if a woman decides that if a woman was visiting and was wearing the talit, I wouldn't protest. The halacha does not say one should protest. By tefillin, halacha is one should protest. By that, but again, that's not what we do, you know. And the way Natalie puts it, I have my hands full with my own mitzvahs. Yeah. Okay. So that becomes interesting. A married woman halachically should be covering her hair. Okay. Now, there are those in the modern Orthodox world who do not cover their hair, but when they come to shul, they'll wear a hat. And that's a certain madrega. Madrega means level. That's a certain madrega of showing respect. Right? When I grew up, my mother did not cover her hair. My stepmother did not cover her hair, and all of the shul, the friend, right, did not cover their hair. But when Shabbos morning was hat time. In the women's section, it was hat, right? That's what that's how they did it. Okay. Many shuls used to have, as we have a kippah bowl for the men to put on, there was a doily bowl. A doily bowl, right? And women, right? Men would come in and put on a kippah, and women would come in and put on a doily. Okay. Which brings us to kippah. So, kippah is an interesting situation, right? Many women I guess, women rabbis, I said to someone, I came to Orange County, that when I went to OC Kosher, I was one of the few people wearing a kippah, and the other two were women. Now, there are some women who are kind of like in their rabbinate sort of thing, right? And they will often wear kippahs, right? So that becomes interesting, right? Because I'm not going to protest because they're doing it right. Right, not necessarily a kippah, but they should be covering there. They should be covering. So I'm not going to protest that. Well, it shouldn't be a kippah. It should be a snood or a keffiyah or a sheitel or this. So that they're getting it right. Maybe and they're not I don't think even the women rabbis, when they wear their kippahs, I don't think they're doing it as a protest. Right? Why should the men do it and we don't? Because the men don't. Right? In the Reform world, the men don't. Right? But rather that's become, actually in the Reform and even conservative world, that's become sort of like rabbinic attire. That even though the men don't wear kippah, the rabbis usually do. Right? So therefore the woman rabbi, that's become more of rabbinic attire, I'd say, in the conservative Reform world, right? But so I'm not going to protest because they're getting it right somewhat. Yeah. Okay. Not okay. So yes. The head should be covered. There are those from women, religious women, who will wear a hat and it'll stick out, on the bottom, right? There are different ways of doing it. right? The when Natalie covers her hair, either, right? So there it is fully covered. Yeah, yeah, and yeah, probably good idea to have Natalie have a session with with the women, right? Yeah, yeah. Oh, you spoke to Natalie. Yeah, good. Yeah. Yeah, yeah. Yeah. Well. Actually, the answer to Jenny is sweetheart. As a married woman, I'm covering my hair. The way of covering it is really, sometimes it could be a hat, sometimes it could be tichel. Natalie wears hats. She wears wraps. She wears shaitels. Yeah. 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 Well, yeah. With natural hair, they are very pricey. That is true. Well, what do you mean? Okay, so I like to talk to different people, and it's not really not this was not good. Before I talk to other people about okay, yeah. So I could just go on some website and buy a wig, yeah, but what I'm saying is, right? Yeah. There are also synthetic wigs, which are, which I might consider no, which are, they're looking better and better, and they're not nearly as pricey, so yeah, but the idea is to cover, and the way of covering that is really up to a person's taste. You know, yeah, you want to cover your head. Yeah, But again, that's for example, there's mitzvah to cover one's head. A baseball hat is covering one's head. Yeah. 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 Covering. Yes, Esther. No, not obligated. Not obligated. Yeah. 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 Rabbinic. It's it's a rabbinic mitzvah. Yeah, because it's in Shulchan Aruch not to go with one's head uncovered. Yeah, and it's interesting. I think for Christians, the whole idea is to bare your head as you go in. But the Pope wears a kippah, and the cardinals wear kippahs. Yeah, 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 yeah. I remember when I was walking in New York, and someone yelled at me, "What's that on your head, Jew boy?" I got a lot of that in New York growing up. And I said, the same thing that your Pope wears. And then I started to run. No, yeah. Growing up, it was interesting when we had the anti-Semitic incident here that our shul was graffitied. So I was interviewed by a woman from CNN. And I spoke. I said, growing up in New York, you walk around with a kippah, you get, yeah, You hear things, you know, was it every time I walked around? No. But when it happened, would I go home and tell people, oh, you won't believe what happened? No. It was part of growing up, their expressions, driving black, driving while black, and they're, walking while Jewish, walking with a kippah, and that's, Do you guys ever get any questions or? Oh yeah. Do people know? I mean, I've walked into Wholesome Choice with my kippah, and the people start asking Ramadan questions. Sometimes people think that it's because there are also some Muslims. Yeah, and Wholesome Choice. Yeah. Yeah. So with you, is it clear that it's Jewish as opposed to Muslim? Uh-huh.
And so, depending on the person, go with it. But then most other times I'll explain exactly kind of what's happening and then they'll say, well, I'm confused because I'm asking, they see a lot of Jews that look like you, And I haven't had anything negative. Like people just ask out of.
You say, what do you mean? Is it my mustache?
Yeah. It's never been a negative. They're just asking out.
Yeah.
I want to
Yeah.
know.
Yeah. Well, it's so interesting because the accusation that is flung at us that Judaism is racist, right? Well, first of all, you can't be a race if it's only matrilineal descent, right? Because you're only getting half of the race, right? Right? So it can't be a race if it's follows the mother, regardless of the father's race, right? And with conversion, right? You go to Israel, you see, everything. Yeah. Right. And especially our shul, we have a tremendous amount of diversity between people of Asian origin, African American origin, Hispanic origin, Lebanese, all right? A little bit of Lebanese origin. Yeah. It's yeah. So it's interesting. When I have had people of Muslims who approach me, who come to speak to me about converting, I tell them to weigh very heavily the family ramifications that this will have. If they want to pursue, it's only on occasion that I've had. It comes to mind. I've had 3 situations. Yeah. And not look, Islam is very close. Is they're used to dietary restrictions. They're used to repeated prayer. They're used to fasting. Yeah, modesty. Yeah, right. But especially in the very fraught political world that we live in today, I just tell them they really need to weigh heavily the family ramifications that this will have. Right? Coupled with, as I say to everyone, there's no obligation for a non-Jew to become Jewish. Right? So it becomes somewhat fraught in those situations. Yeah. All right, my friends. Yasher koach, everybody. Very welcome. Good night, everybody. Yes. Good night, Rose. Good night, Leticia. Good night.
Good night.